Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us once again for our bi-weekly guided meditation and Dharma talk here at the Blue Lotus Meditation and Mindfulness Center here in beautiful Brainerd, Minnesota, central Minnesota. If anybody has never been to Minnesota, it's filled with forests and pine trees and lakes and a lot of fun and pretty activities to partake in and look around. And the people are very nice as well. There's a little saying that they have calling Minnesota nice, or they call it Minnesota nice. And the people are absolutely wonderful. But truthfully, wherever I go, I come across very, very nice and kind people. So I think Minnesota nice may be all throughout the world to some degree. So welcome again. Today is August 4th. Excuse me, it is 6 p.m. here in the Central Time Zone where I am. And so thank you for coming out and sitting with us this evening. And just a brief announcement before we begin. We do have our YouTube channel memberships, and they're only 99 cents per month. And it's a way for some of our practitioners or those interested to just look and see any behind the scenes or interesting little tidbits of information or videos that we post a couple times a month, and we keep the cost low because remember, we are totally donation based, for the most part. I shouldn't say totally. There's a couple things that, some of the retreats just to keep the lights on and so forth, but may be interested in that, our YouTube channel memberships, and then our Dharma Institute, where we offer various different courses, and new courses are being added all of the time. And so you may want to check those out and see if there's a course on mindfulness or just understanding the Dharma, right? The Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, mindfulness for your families and for children, mindfulness for educators. So there's a whole gamut of mindfulness and meditation and Dharma courses that you may find interesting for your families and for your own development as well. And so let's begin with the three jewels. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Sathu, Sathu, Sathu. So very good. So tonight's topic is there truly a mountain to climb? So often we face, or perhaps we think we face, challenge and obstacles that really may seem insurmountable at the time. And so we'll see how our viewpoints, our thoughts and actions, how they perhaps affect our perception and perspective and judgment of these obstacles or tasks or these mountains. We'll see what they are as we come along. And to help us with our perspectives when we face things, there's a wonderful little guided meditation that we can practice right now before we get into our Dharma talk. It's called Changing Our Perspective, because very often the mountain isn't the mountain, right? Our perspective is the mountain. And so this guided meditation will help bring about a more sense of realism or perspective to that perhaps larger perspective. And so let's begin by taking a moment to settle our bodies into a comfortable position. You may close your eyes or keep them slightly open with a soft focus, looking downward in front of you if you choose. Breathe in. Pause. And breathe out. And as you sit there, go ahead and allow a half smile to just simply rest on your face. Remember, this is a exploratory moment for us. Allow your spine to lift and your shoulders to soften. And soften your belly as you continue to settle in. Breathe in. Pause. And breathe out. Good. And let's meditate on changing our perspectives. And recall a time when you felt you were in a no-win situation and you experienced feelings of stress and anxiety of what's to come. Think about all of the negative outcomes that you imagined. Could have been the end of a relationship, or being late to work and you feared being fired or reprimanded by your boss. Perhaps you were just uncertain about test results or a score. Now think about what the real outcome was of that situation or conversation or scores or results. Whatever the outcome, even if it was what you imagined came true, you are still here, alive, feeling, thinking, caring. And importantly, you are wiser about this type of situation. Breathe in. Pause. And breathe out. Now, when you encounter a new or different challenge, imagine yourself at the foot of a large mountain. Looking up, you can hardly see the summit or the top of that mountain. Looking at your feet, all you see is rock. Monotonous, colored rock. But you begin the climb. One hand at a time, one foot at a time. making sure that you are safe and stable with each movement. The climbing seems to take forever, but you have the persistence to continue upward. One hand at a time, one foot at a time. As each moment passes, you look around you and you can see off in the distance behind you and below you. The trees are now smaller. The ground is well below you, but upwards you continue. Soon you reach the peak and you have a complete panoramic view all around you. You can see the ground from where you started. You can see unlimitedly in all directions. And when you are able to see in all directions, you begin to understand that there is more in front of you than that monotonous mountain rock. There are colors and sounds, sights and smells to behold. And as you look around, you see several alternative pathways up this mountain. None of these pathways were either easier or harder than the path you took. They were simply different. Breathe in. Pause. And breathe out. And when you reflect upon a challenging situation, you understand that there is more than one perspective and more than one point of view. You realize this new perspective and you allow yourself to become at ease with openness. You can breathe in with compassion for others. And you can exhale with gratitude for yourself. And go ahead for the next few moments, just breathe in and out on your own. And slowly bring yourself back to the present moment, to where we are, with ease and calmness. Perspective is important, and perception is as well. When we look at mountains, and they very often, and when I'm using the word mountain in this sense, I'm talking about challenges or obstacles or hard times that we may be facing. They may seem very hard and challenging and insurmountable and unresolvable. But how often have we faced those before, and yet you're still here? Right? Is it persistence? Is it resiliency? Combination, other factors? And so when we look at these mountains in front of us, it's important. Sometimes we may hear the words perception, right? Or perspective. And perception is the process of interpreting, right? With sensory information. How does it feel? How does it smell? How do I feel inside? While perspective is the overall framework which we live, in the world, which we experience. And perception is more immediate, right? And sensory, tactile based, right? How do I feel in my gut? How do I feel in my heart? Whereas again, where perspective is a is a broad spectrum of concepts and our beliefs and values of a particular situation. So oftentimes we use them interchangeably and or synonymously, and they do have some overlap, between them. But perception is, again, how we feel about the particular something, right? Particular situation. But when we think about that mountain in front of us, we can, if we adjust our perspective or understanding or our viewpoint of that challenge, is it an obstacle? Is it truly an obstacle? Or is it something else? Is it an inconvenience? Oftentimes, what we consider an obstacle is just nothing more than an inconvenience. I don't feel like doing it. I don't feel like spending that extra time to do this particular task or help somebody else out or do this particular task, right? Sometimes we just consider it an inconvenience, right? But there are times, when where this situation may actually prove to be a challenge. And thinking of Buddha's words on these and during these times, and for any time for that matter, he states that we are what we think, right? All that we are arises with our thoughts, and with our thoughts, we make the world. Perhaps you have even heard the other saying that, don't make a mountain out of a molehill. Some of you may not know what a mole is, but a mole is like a little tiny little rodent. And when they dig, they just make a little mound, when they're by their little hole, little dirt mound that, it's easily walked over or whatnot. It's certainly not a mountain. So that, what we are what we think, right? If we think that an object is so difficult or so challenging, it's going to be, right? And there may be some challenge to it, and that's fine, right? Not everything is going to be simply easy. But what the Buddha is telling us with a very wise statement, right, is that if we think it's going to be a miserable task, a miserable time, it will be. Actually, there's even a Disney. Now that I think about it, there's a little Disney with, I think it was Snow White. Whistle while, or maybe it's Cinderella, but whistle while you work, right? So yeah, even whistling can help make the time go by a little bit more pleasantly during challenging times. That doesn't mean you have to whistle, but it's our perspective. It's our attitude. It's our mindset during these challenging times that determine our well-being. Right? So is it an obstacle or is it something else? And again, very well could be something very challenging. Could be a family change. Could be a health change. Absolutely. right? But is it more likely I got into a little fender bender and I'm going to be late for work and now I have to call the car insurance company? Or, oh, I forgot to pay, a credit card bill or something like that, right? Maybe not the most pleasant experience or the thing you wanted to do that day, but it happens. Remember, suffering comes in all fashions, right? It doesn't have to be something grandiose, right? It can be something as minor as I forgot to pay my credit card bill or whatever it is. So visualize a mountain, kind of like what we did in that guided meditation. And I would like for you to just try to be as detailed as you can. Okay, thinking about the summit, the peak. Are there rock exposures? Is there snow on the top? Maybe the different season that you're in. Maybe in summertime you don't get a lot of snow on your mountains where you are. And there are basically two types of mountains that we can kind of consider here, right? They're the ones that we look at, right? Either from a distance or a picture, right? What does that mean? Because obviously a picture of a mountain of some sort or one that we're looking at far away doesn't pose a problem. But maybe those are situations that could be arising in the future, right? Maybe something that we foresee may begin happening, or maybe that mountain or that challenging situation is not geared towards us, but maybe a family member or a dear friend, right? So that's a type of mountain, because even when our friends have hard times, challenging times, we oftentimes suffer along with them because we care about them, right? Maybe maybe a dear friend, does receive some bad news, health wise or financially or relationship wise. So even though that may not be our particular mountain in that sense, it still affects us because we are loving, compassionate, empathetic beings. Perhaps it's even like what's going on in the world, all the conflict that we see in the world, right? Affecting families and children and people and elderly and young and even the soldiers that are involved, right? Even though we aren't there physically, perhaps you are, but for the majority of us, maybe not. That can be a mountain for us too, because we feel poorly. We feel very badly, not poorly, but we feel very badly, and we can empathize with how others are experiencing these very, very trying times, challenging times, not only wondering where they're going to get food and water, perhaps being, even affected directly by violence. And then the other type of mountain to consider is the one that we need to climb. That is the mountain that directly affects us. Again, maybe that is the mountain of health news or financial news or relationship, right? Job wise, there's a whole lot of education wise, right? If you're in school. So those are the types of mountains to consider, right? We can have empathy with ourselves, just like we have empathy and compassion for others when we look at that distant mountain, but we can have compassion and empathy for ourselves as well. And just acknowledging that this is a hard time, and it very well, again, it can be, but it's all in our mindset as well, right? If we think it's going to be just totally disastrous, it certainly will be, because when we, it's like that law of attraction, right? If we focus on the negative, you're going to get negative. If you complain a lot, there's going to be a lot to complain about. If you're optimistic, open-minded, time goes by, the situation goes by much more, maybe not joyfully, but much more manageably, right? And we are shaped by our thoughts, right? We become what we think, right? And when the mind is pure, joy follows. like a shadow that never leaves, right? And that's another wise saying from the Buddha, right? It's knowing that everything is impermanent. So when we see those mountains, think about climbing that mountain, right? It was one step at a time, one foothold at a time, one handhold at a time. And each time you made a move, right, reposition your foot or hand, you made sure it was steady, right? You made sure it was safe to make the next move before you did. And so we can be joyful with each one of those steps that we take, right? Even if we aren't at the mountaintop just yet, even if we haven't completed or gone through whatever that situation is, one step at a time, and be joyful with that step, that it is safe and stable. So just accepting that situation is beneficial as well, and very helpful in our overcoming the challenging time in front of us. It certainly is. And I'm reminded of, oftentimes we hear, excuse me, oftentimes we hear others complain and be very curt, even sometimes on the level of being totally rude and harsh when it comes time to just that healing process, even when it comes time to acceptance. I remember reading somebody's article or post. I forget exactly what it was. I remember the general sentiment of it was all the positive thinking, right? The acceptance and our mindset doesn't do a lot of good, because this person had lost their legs, I believe it was, right? Or they had no longer had function of their legs. They either lost them or they lost the function of their legs. And their idea was that all of the mindfulness and meditation didn't work because they're never going to regrow legs. And that's true. Right? We're not lizards or amphibians, regrowing body parts, but that's not the healing, right? So their idea was healing is bogus because they would never walk again. And that's a misunderstanding. And that's a limited perspective of that word healing when it comes time to climbing mountains. You won't. You especially if you lost your legs, like physically had them removed. No, you're not going to regrow legs. But the healing, the growth, right, happens in the mind. The joy happens in the mind that they're still alive, right? Having legs doesn't make you any less, or not having legs doesn't make them any less of a human being, right, than they were when they had them, or any less than a human being than you or I right now. So the cynicism sometimes is very detrimental. And so that's that negative thought. If you are thinking negative thoughts, you're never going to be happy. If you're always complaining, you'll never be happy. Things are not always going to go your way, right? Too many variables in life for them to go your way. Outside forces, outside circumstances. But you can always control yourself, your own mental well-being, right? And so, again, we are shaped by our thoughts and we become what we think. If we are angry, we're always going to be angry. If we are joyful, we will be joyful. So, allowing joy to follow you like a shadow, right? That never leaves. May be hard. Sometimes it's going to take that acceptance. Sometimes acceptance can be very challenging. But how can we move about? How can we move forward? How can we truly view if that mountain is really there, right? And the Buddha certainly gives us the Noble Eightfold Path. And there's some really poignant ones they're really instrumental for our purposes for this talk right now. It's right mindfulness, right? Being aware in that present moment, knowing that that moment's not going to be here forever. If you're unemployed, right? You're not going to be unemployed forever. Test results, they may find blood test results, for example, x-rays, whatnot, that shock is not going to be there forever, right? Of whatever they are. And that affects our right view, right? Again, knowing that those results, whatever they are not personal. A lot of times we think that they are, right? Or a lot of times we think that, if we get negative results, or we don't get that promotion, or we don't get hired, or my spouse leaves me, or whatever it is, we oftentimes take that as personal. Sometimes it's not. Spouse maybe, right? Depending. But we can always adjust our view, right, to something more open-minded and right thought. Right? Are we allowing ourselves to dwell and ruminate on the negative? There has seldom been a truly negative experience in my life that I can think of. They're not all have been, daisy gardens and so forth. But when I step back and look at them climbing the mountain, they actually were very beneficial to me, advantageous to my lifestyle. And so knowing that, again, what we think is very important, and how we think is very important to how we live our lives. And right action, right? How do we engage with others? How do we engage with ourselves? How do we engage with the situation? Right? Are we being aggressive towards a situation in a negative way, right? Or are we being peaceful in acceptance of it? Right? If you got fired, there's not much you can do, right? If your spouse leaves you, there's not much you can do, right? So being mindful of our own mindfulness and our right view and thought and action is very important. So how can we strengthen those? Of course, a meditation practice, right? Again, remembering that even Buddha tells us meditation brings about wisdom. We will know how to behave, how to respond, how to act in those trying times, and understanding, are they really that trying at that time? But also knowing that they will pass. Nothing is going to stay there forever. All conditions originate from something else. And that's a good thing, because that trying time, that mountain that you're facing, that will be the condition for something better to come along. So something to think about, something to practice as you go about. So our next talk is on August 18th at 6 p.m. Central Time, and it's your many steps to awakening. And so maybe think about that as so often when people embark on meditation and mindfulness, they want to achieve enlightenment right away, right? But if you know a little bit, and we'll talk about a little bit more of the history of the Buddha himself and his previous lives, right? Some things that happened in his previous lives that he was able to recall, and which helped him in that particular life, in his final life, before obtaining nirvana. So we all have many steps, and so we'll take a look at those many steps towards our own awakening. And with that, my friends, you're always welcome to reach out to us, comment, and ask questions if you like. Peruse our website for any resources that you need, or any support. Right? We're happy to help in any way that we can. With that, my friends, my practitioners, wish you all an evening of peace, ease, and well-being, and practice that empathy and compassion. Your heart is very important, not just for yourself, but for others as well. And so sharing that with others and treating others as you would want to be treated is very helpful and skillful to our own well-being as well, to our own bodhicitta. Many blessings to you all, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.